Do you know what is the best way to level up your garden this year and really take it to the next level? It is to keeping track of your progress, of what you observe, so you can learn from it next year and really see some patterns and learn from it and make adjustments moving forward for the garden years to come. I'm Steffi. I'm a home gardener in Attleboro, Massachusetts, in Zone 6. And let's just say staying organized and keeping track of things makes my German heart happy. So in this video, I'm going to show you how you can keep track of your garden year in a garden journal, where to get started, and just also overall what are the benefits of keeping track of it. So let's get going. I want you to now raise a hand down below in the comments if the way you keep track of your garden is by keeping pictures on your phone. It is a very, very common theme I see with a lot of my garden friends. They snap pictures, and that is more or less their progress log for gardening. When they go back, they have to go back through the pictures of their phone. That is definitely better than not keeping track at all, but it's a lot better if you combine it together with a garden journal or with a more structured way, so you actually know when to look for, like in a certain month or whatever, on your phone to really find those pictures back. So let me give you just 3 reasons for why keeping track in a garden journal can be so beneficial. Number 1, it is really, really helpful to keep track of your seed starting schedule and use this to fine tune over the year. So for example, if you had in one year started your tomatoes, let's just say mid-March, and they were like 3 feet tall when you planted them out mid-May, that was a good indication for you to note down. Let's start those seeds like a week or 2 later in the following year to just not have 3 feet tomato plants, because that's a pain to transplant and the plant don't like it either. So this is a really, really great way to fine tune this over the years. Number 2 is to track your plant success, to just keep track of like how a plant is performing, which ones are yielding well, which ones are doing well. When do you see the first type of like disease on the plant starting to decline in late summer? Those pieces of information can be really, really valuable for you later on to make decision which plants you keep in your garden and which plants you will kick out of the garden. And then number 3 is to see patterns in your garden and in your ecosystem which you're building with your garden. For example, when certain pests are showing up, that can help for you to really be prepared next year at the same time around, to be vigilant, trying to get them earlier. So for example, this dang squash bug, which for me shows always up, and it is really, really important in the first wave to find all those egg clusters and get them early so they are not multiply exponentially and having a feast in your garden. But with those things and knowing when you can expect them to show up is really, really helpful to be prepared, have the duct tape ready if you know, and really get ahead of the curve without any other pesticides. So those are the 3 reasons: fine-tuning your existing plants, keeping track of your success and just the yields and everything around the plant, and to see patterns such as like when pest occurs or other things. So now let's talk a little bit about how to start a garden journal. You can use whatever journal you like. If you're like more a free spirit person, to just keep track of this in notes. That is how I actually started. I just had like a normal ring book to keep track. I also love to track my harvest, for example, like what I'm that crazy person who comes into the kitchen and like counts everything and weighs everything. I get a kick out of it to see that I'm able to grow each year more and more. Fun fact, last year I grew almost 400 pounds of produce in my teeny tiny garden. So I'm very proud of it. And it's wild to see how those numbers accumulate. I get great satisfaction out of it. But that was one of the first things I started, like tracking when I started seeds and like what was the harvest, and then it started to spiral a little bit from there. When you look around searching for a garden journal, this is where there are very, very many different options available. For me, I tried, I think like 4 or 5 journals out on the market, but none of them really, really worked for me. The main reasons were either they were too small, like they were like pocketbook type of, or like field book type of notebooks, and I have gigantic handwriting, so that just doesn't work for me. But then also the other item was that oftentimes there was just not enough pages for the number of plants I wanted to track. That was the other bummer. So for that reason, I went out and actually designed my own garden journal. So this is the paper version. I also have in iPad version because I love my digital journal. I keep track and I keep record of everything on my iPad. I know the overlap of gardeners using iPads for journaling or for note keeping is a small overlap. That's why I have now also the paper version, as many of you told me how much they love the digital layout, but wish they had a paper version. So you can see it is really large. I've also have included a little QR code for everyone who buys the book to be able to access additional pages for the book in case you are running out of pages in certain sections, to ensure you will never run out of pages. So that was something important to me. Nevertheless, if you run out of pages, let me know by how many. That is something I'm still fine-tuning, so send me an email. I'm curious, but it is a really great tool to keep track of all things for your garden for this year. So I think of tracking my garden year and documenting my garden year in 3 sections. The first one is like getting started, the next one is during the season, and the last one is the review portion of it, to make decisions of what you want to keep and what you want to go. In the starting area, what is really important to keep track of is really when you start your seeds. Like, note down the day you plant those seeds out in your soil blocks, in your little containers, and get started with them. And then the next item I typically note is when they germinate, because what you might notice is when you look at those seed packages, there are always ranges. And after a little bit of time, you will recognize from certain seed companies, they are, let's just say, lowballing their ranges because their seeds typically come up within no time. But if you're planning to have your seedlings in a certain size by mid-May to plant them out, 2 weeks difference in the range because they were lowballing the range makes a difference, especially for things like tomatoes, for example. 2 weeks are like 10 inches in terms of tomato growth sometimes. But for that reason, it's really important to note those down and learn from it. So you start when you seed them out, then when the seeds germinate. Then I typically note down when I pot them up for the first time. So what are those time frames and how long I want to plant. I typically these days do not pot them up twice. That is one of my reasons why I have such a fine-tuned seed starting schedule. I really want to ensure that I only pot them up once and then they go out straight. A few things like zinnias or basil or so, I don't even pot them up. They grow in the 1.5-inch soil blocks and get out straight away. This is a very space efficient way to grow. You don't always need like really big plants to go out. For me, it usually doesn't make a difference. Even on the opposite, the larger ones I had more trouble with than the smaller ones to get going, because I think the larger ones are more prone to transplant shock after a while, because they've got so comfy and so cozy in your seed starting room. So that is just something to keep in mind. Bigger is not always better. Typically the last item I note down from the indoor seed starting period is when I then finally transplanted them outside. So those are really helpful dates to go back to and then fine tune it. And also while you're doing it, note down where the timing works out great, where the timing is too early or too late, things like that. And you are able to really take this up a notch then for the next year. During the garden season, so from the moment the seedlings and everything is transplanted and outside and Mother Nature is taking care of it, this is really when I want to record when was the first harvest, when was the last harvest, what are the yields, are there any other observations like pests or diseases which creep in. Here I know, like, I get always late blight on my tomatoes. It doesn't matter how good I scrub my trellises year after year or how well I clean my shears between cuts. it always shows up at the end of the season. So I'll try to push it out as late as I can and be vigilant with that. It's also weather dependent. Last year we had a lot of rain that like just spreads disease like crazy, right? So there are things to note down and really make observations, which will help you to just learn and grow with your garden more. And then after the year, what I typically do is really to go back and sit down and reminisce and think of what I really enjoyed, what did I like, what did I hate, what didn't I like in my garden, and just to note it down, because we always think we'll remember, but we never do. We might remember the really, really highlights and the really, really lowlights, but then the real things in the margins in between is what typically gets forgotten or gets washed away by memory and overwritten with time. So to have this in a garden journal, it makes really all the difference to really decide also if you have just a very limited space, that is expensive real estate. So you want to make sure that you have always the best plants with the best yields in your garden or in your cut flower garden to really ensure that you get the most blooms or the most tomatoes out of it. So those pieces of information really, really help you to make great strides. Or what I also love to capture my cut flower garden for my dahlias, the bloom progression, like with which color do they start out and like what temperature the color shifts and stuff like that. It's fascinating to see those data points and know them, and also help other gardeners then with the knowledge to move forward and help them learn as well. I want to help you to get started with your seed starting schedule. So in the description you can find not only the links to my garden journals, the digital one and the paper one, but there's also a sign up link to my seed starting schedule if you want to get a printable version of it. It is a Zone 6 schedule, so please keep that in mind, but it gives you a great starting point on where you can start your seeds if you're interested to sign up for it. Otherwise, let me know in the comments what you keep track of for your garden. I'm really, really always curious to see what other people keep track of or not. And if you have any questions, otherwise subscribe and watch another video. Thank you.